We also have Alex Harvey, as well as James Jensen, who I know from the days of Void, and also Andrea Cojocaru, amazing architect. So there we go. Hey, Chris of Engage. Why don't you go ahead and take it over and have everybody introduce themselves and dive into why 6DOF matters.
Absolutely looking forward for this discussion. So let's start out with James Jensen here, formerly the co-founder of the Void VR and now with Limitless Flight, doing the jump. James, so awesome to have you here. And we're going to get an opportunity to have you explain a little bit more about what you're doing with 6DOF here later in the program. We also have Andrea Cojocaru, who is doing all kinds of design in fully immersive virtual reality, and also is doing a lot of philosophical deep diving into the human's relationships with 6 Degrees of Freedom and this immersive technology that we have, kind of exploring how this level up in human communication is impacting our psyche and what we can do in these environments. And we also have one of my favorites, Alex Harvey from River Reality in virtual reality is what that stands for. And he's a master at capturing reality and bringing it into a virtual space. So we've got a wide range of uses of 6 Degrees of Freedom here. And before we kick off, I just wanted to mention that when Ben first reached out to us to do this panel, what we're looking for is, we find a lot of people that are experiencing virtual reality through WebXR because it's so easy to access WebXR. But so many people have not even put on a headset. So they don't even know what 3DOF is, 3 Degrees of Freedom, let alone 6 Degrees of Freedom. So we want to address that audience that is just starting to get a taste of what virtual reality is and really break it down as to what is 6 Degrees of Freedom, what does that mean, how does it work, and why does it matter? So let's start out with the first question, which is, what is 6 Degrees of Freedom? Anyone want to hop on that one?
Alex? Obviously, I love chatting, Chris. But yeah, I can answer that if you want. I'm sure everyone can as well. But,
yes.
I've been answering the same question today at a show in Liverpool that we've been showing our virtual reality. So for me, 3DOF, 6DOF, 3 Degrees of Freedom allows you to move your head around with your shoulders, and you can look inside a 360 video or a 3D 180 video. But 6 Degrees of Freedom allows you to step into that world, pick things up, interact, walk around, kneel underneath and look underneath things. And for me, always, I like to have it looking like the real world, so we use photogrammetry to make that 6DOF environment. But yeah, that's my quick roundup of 3DOF, 6DOF.
Andrea, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, I can offer a slightly different perspective. I've been actually thinking about this idea of a bigger definition of VR, and what I have settled upon lately is that it's a new way of communicating. So in architecture, which is the field that I come from, and in all other fields, we use level of abstraction to communicate things and information. Like we use text, we tell stories in writing, we use videos, we use paintings, but those all imply a level of abstraction. They're not the real thing. And there's a reason, is because we can't communicate that to people who maybe are not there. So we can't take the real thing to them. We take an abstraction to them, and they have to use their cognitive processes to read the text and reconstruct in their minds the real thing. And of course, lots is lost in translation in that process of reconstruction. There are many good uses for abstraction. The reason why we're such smart little creatures is because we can manipulate levels of abstraction and reality in many inventive ways. But in many cases, there is no need for that. So we have VR that has 6 degrees of freedom that allows us just not to abstract anymore and to bring something that's very, very close to the real thing that you can interact with in a way that's very, very close to how you would interact with physical reality to these other people.
Communicating through experience rather than abstraction.
I love that. Yeah, and I 100% agree. And I love stealing quotes from The Matrix. And one of my favorite ones I like stealing, which goes along with what you're talking about, Andrea, and what I'm very passionate about, is when Neo touches the back of that leather couch and he says, wait, this is real? And Morpheus says, well, what is real? If real is what you can see, taste, or touch, then real is just electrical impulses in your brain. And so for me, 6DOF and all of the other physical effects that we're creating inside of these simulations, the closer you can get to reality, my hypothesis is you can actually build memories. You can build something that's so close to reality that you store it in the same way that you store any other experience, which that becomes really powerful, because from my perspective, we are the equivalent of all the experiences we've had to date. And what if we could curate some of those experiences? What if we could get a different perspective of how our life should be when we were younger? I mean, the training tools inside of the simulation, inside of 6DoF and all these other effects could be really impactful in the future. So I think it goes way beyond entertainment, but that's just my own perspective.
So, and I think for those that haven't actually experienced 6DoF, one of the things I like to do is when I'm in a video call and I'm sharing my perspective from inside of a headset on that Zoom call, I see an aha moment with people when I do this. I'll stand up, I'll be looking at a virtual table here, and I'll say, all right, guys, check this out. I'm changing my perspective as I bend down with my headset. I'm physically getting down on the ground and looking under the table. And I like to stick a piece of gum under the table and say, I can see the piece of gum because I've literally physically crawled the table. And then they go, really? That's possible? I'm like, yeah, that's 6 degrees of freedom right there.
Nice.
And if they've only experienced 3DoF, it is such a mind-blowing experience for them to interact with that environment. They're just off the scale. You must see that all the time. I guess we all see that all the time. That change from 3DoF to 6DoF.
I'm curious. I would love to hear from any of you. What was your first experience with 6DoF, and what was the impact for you personally?
It's looked like he queued my video, so you can actually mute the video, and I just want to have him show the first minute and a half of this. This was the beginning of the Void, and what we were playing with was there wasn't 6DoF. We had to create it. This was a system we were using called Polhemus, which was electromagnetic system, and we were using that, attaching it to a DK2 that would allow us to actually traverse the space, and then we started mapping the virtual wall to physical walls. You can see one of my partners there, Abel, actually touching the wall. So those little mounts out there actually are electromagnetic fields, and we were walking in those fields and mapping it, and it was incredible, you guys. I mean, the first time you could walk around and you could touch a surface that matched with virtual reality, we were like, wow, this is it. We did it. And it was pretty incredible at that time. Before that, we just had the laptop with the DK2, and we were standing in one place and battling aliens. But anyways, that's my first experience of it.
You muted, Chris. Chris just muted.
Sorry about that, guys. I was just saying, there's something really magical about like that 10th or 12th step in virtual reality. And I remember experiencing that for my first time in the Void as well. As soon as you take like that 10th step, it's like your brain just accepts it as completely real, and you're not coming out at that point. And it's very intense with that warehouse scale 6 degree of freedom VR. Andrea,
one other thing to add on that too, I would say one of the reasons why that's really important is when you have evidence in the physical world that the virtual is what you're seeing, that actually mitigates some of the sickness too. If you touch objects, that it just proves to your mind that what you're seeing is real, which is really cool.
Cool. I want to shorten what I was going to say because we're limited on time, and I know you have some amazing stuff, each of you, to talk about. I wanted to just comment real quick about 6 degree of freedom and how it works very briefly. We have inside out tracking, which is what like the Quest uses, right? Where it's reading your environment and your position within the environment from the headset itself. Then you have outside in tracking, like in the case of Steam VR, where you've got the lighthouse trackers that are in your room, scanning down and measuring the distance your headset is from those devices and triangulating your position within that space. And then, we always refer to this SLAM technology, which is simultaneous location and mapping. Don't want to get too deep into that because you all have way too many cool things to talk about. So I'd like to shift over to Andrea now. Maybe ask, what was your first experience with 6DoF? What impact did it have on you? And what are you doing with 6DoF in your professional life in VR right now? I'd love to hear.
My first experience was a DK1, and I put it on, and I was so blown away. I just realized that for the first time in the history of architecture and, well, humanity, we have created synthetic space. That for me was just such a mind-blowing thing. It's like, holy shit. It's like, it's as if we had just discovered the most amazing thing an architect could have imagined. And 3 weeks later, I quit my job. I was a lead architect and a project manager in a quote unquote traditional architecture studio. And I just started to learn Unity and all the good stuff you need to know to just become a VR developer and coding. And I thought I could not become a VR developer, because having access to synthetic space and being able to generate synthetic space is going to change architecture. I later realized that it's going to change way more than just architecture. But in terms of what I do now with my company, we take it one day at a time. And first, we're trying to develop a VR platform for architectural design. So we first try to change architecture, and then we have some bigger plans about changing more than that.
Great. And how does 6DOF, what is the significance of 6DOF in what you're doing now with your company, Andrea?
So in traditional architecture, you go back to the levels of abstraction, right? You draw plans and sections, and maybe you make some three-dimensional looking perspectives, but there's no way to communicate that the nature of that space to another person until the building is built, right? So the building is built, and a few $1 million later, oh, here's the space, by the way, right? Because otherwise you can only talk about it through these drawings, which have way too high of a level of abstraction for most people to really understand in depth the spatial conditions in there. So we are starting to develop methodologies and protocols to design architecture and to test architectural spaces and to share those spaces that we have created and optimize them way before it gets to the few $1 million spent and when the thing is like done. So asking people when the building is built, hey, what do you think about this? It's too late. So there are many extremely exciting new things that we're exploring right now within architecture.
And Andrea, one more question for you. You know, I could experience that on a screen, or I could even experience that in 3DOF. What is psychologically happening as soon as I move from 3DOF into 6DOF in an architectural experience like you're describing? What happens?
You start to observe the effect that space has on you, which is just not possible to do by looking at a drawing or a perspective on the screen. All of a sudden, you become this little creature inside a space, and you start to think, not just feel, all sorts of things. And maybe the most exciting thing in this for an architect is the fact that we use, because of VR, I believe we will leave behind us a conceptual approach to architecture that's about architecture as an object, as a big fancy sculpture, like a spaceship that just landed in the city, which is how we plan museums and fancy buildings today. And we move towards architecture as a spatial experience, as a story, as a narrative in space. So it becomes about, how does this building make me feel? What is the story that this building is trying to tell me? What are the thoughts that this building is generating in my mind, right? How many times have you entered a building and asked yourself, what is this building trying to tell me? How is this building transforming me? Buildings have always done these things. We just haven't been able to play with these concepts well enough because we've never had a way to do that before.
Great. And all right, thank you, Andrea. Alex, let's pick on you a little bit here. You are the master of bringing reality into virtual reality. You play with 6DOF every day. tell us a little bit about, what are you doing with 6DoF in your line of work, and what difference does it make?
Yeah, cool. Well, it goes back to, if I go back quite a bit, I started my career, if you like, in Codemasters racing games. So I was making Colin McRae, Formula One, Grid, Dirt Showdown, all these racing games back at Codemasters. And realism was what we always went for. We were trying to make the wheels feel like they were properly on the road with all the different variables of the suspension and gears and all that. And then I got VR on, and I was really disappointed that it all felt like a cartoon. I was absolutely annoyed and disappointed that it was like a cartoon until I put on realities.io. And I always shout out to these guys because they're the ones that I get shivers thinking it now. They're the ones that made me want to work in VR. So I left Codemasters and started River because I thought that what realities.io were doing on Steam back in the day was putting in a photogrammetry scene into VR headset and allowing you to teleport around the scene, look underneath things. But the downside for me was that some of the environment had holes in it, and I know that it's hard to get that sorted out now, so I appreciate why there was holes. But I wanted it to look exactly like the real world, and I wanted to add movement into there, interactivity, because there was no interactivity with stuff. Because I was a video editor at Codemasters making their trailers, it was just a perfect thing for me to go, okay, we can now take this environment and I can make a story like I can in the real world, apart from we can now walk around that video. It's just like making video interactive. So that was where it started, Realities and the lab. And then we just went on a whole journey of, yes, we've made 3DoF software for training, which is our classroom solution, but our 6 Degrees of Freedom, which we make for UK, US government, counter-terrorism type training and do police training as well. It's important to us to use photogrammetry, which is the process of taking thousands of photos of any real world object, person or place, anything. And you can literally scan it with your mobile phone at the moment. I've been doing a lot of polycam scanning and reality capture scanning. But you can scan now with your mobile phone. Chris, you've seen some of the scans. It's nearly there. I can take 250 photos on my phone, turn it into a 3D model, send it to Chris, and in about an hour, we're inside Engage, inside my photogrammetry model, picking up things. My mind was blown every week when Chris sends me a new screenshot of him stealing one of my models from SketchUp, putting it into Engage, and then walking around it. We need to do more of that, because I feel that although it takes a while to make these experiences, the faster I can make a story, I want to be able to produce virtual reality photorealistic video, photorealistic environments at the same speed in which we make video. That's my goal.
Amazing. I just want to comment real quick, Alex. So one of the coolest things I've done with some of your products is, you did that scan of the G7 Summit space, right? Over at Harvey Bay.
Yes.
And I want to bring this up because this is the importance of 6DoF, right? You were able to take a drone up, scan the entire village, bring it into Engage, where we were then able to collaborate, all go in together and walk around. And what's cool about that is we can shrink that model down and position people, or blow it up life size, hop in a virtual helicopter and literally fly through that village. And what's cool about that is the security folks can physically walk through that village, get to positions and have line of sight and feel that distance and that space, which you don't have to go to the location anymore. You can bring the location to us and do that same sort of training.
Exactly like we did.
Exactly
like we did for that Harvey Bay, the G7 Summit. We laser scanned it and photogrammetry scanned it in about 6 hours. And then literally 3 hours later, we sent the model to Chris, and we had the sniper teams in the windows looking at the angles down to where the helicopter was going to land. My mind was blown, but their mind was even more blown. Anyway.
Those cars were still parked there. We're going to be doing this stuff in real time at some point. You know this.
Yeah, we speak to get a load of 5G connections. We can really do this fast. And the guys hate me because I'm trying to do it fast all the time. They really frustrate them because they want to do it slowly and make sure it's amazing. And I'm like, just let's do it,
Quick
and then
and
we'll
dirty,
make it amazing next time.
Yep. James, let's talk to you. You guys, so we've gone through all these different levels and use cases. What your specialty is combining virtual reality with the real world. So you're not just bringing the real world into virtual reality, you're overlaying the physical world with virtual reality. You're literally combining the two for a purely true physicality experience that is the most immersed I've ever been in my life, is experiencing some of what you have to offer in these physical locations. I think you even coined your own internal term for this, hyper reality. So maybe catch us up a little bit about where you've been with 6DOF, how you're using 6DOF now, and why 6DOF is so important with your current projects. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, I'm so excited to share. I'll try to be as quick as I can, but just to piggyback that last conversation, the way we're creating our content is actually the supersized version of what you just talked about. We have a rig, and this is a video I was going to show, and I'll just talk about it. We have a rig that goes on a helicopter, and the thing has really high resolution still cameras. It has 850 megapixel cameras, and we literally fly a helicopter over any location. We use reality capture to do a recreation of that, and we're doing it down to a centimeter accuracy. So we're bringing these real world environments into the jump experience. The jump experience, the new project I'm working on, was really piggybacks some of the stuff that I did with the Void. But what I realized was all of the important things that you need to have in the simulation. You need to have all the 6DOF, 6 degrees of freedom, rotation and translation, but then you also need to add, from my perspective, you need to add other physical evidence that you're actually there. And that is wind, that's scent, that's smell, that's heat, vibration, all those other things being synchronized at the same time really allows you to completely go all the way there. This is actually happening to me. I now have a memory of wingsuit and base jumping and I before in my life. I've actually done it 50 times in my simulator, and I've survived every time, even though I've crashed several times learning how to do it. Jump is a one-to-one wingsuit and base jumping experience where you have to walk up to the edge. You feel the wind coming over the edge. You smell the pine trees, and you literally have to trust fall in this. You jump out into what looks like death, and you get up to speed and you can fly. And we're using 6DOF inside of the experience to allow your body to articulate the wingsuit just like you would in a real situation. So we're using dihedral shapes for the wingsuit. We're using real physics. We basically extend the real world physics into virtual reality, and then you can fly wherever you want inside of this experience that we've captured. So it's not 360 video. This is an actual recreation of the environment. You fly. When you get to a low enough altitude, you can pull your parachute, or we automatically deploy your parachute, and then you fly, and then you land down at the bottom, and you can control the parachute mechanic as you get to the bottom of this. But, touching on some of Andrea's stuff, we're also looking at this from a perspective of not just entertainment, but also what kind of experience is this for an individual? If this feels real and creates a memory, then we are really looking at kind of the fear barrier and the psychological fear barrier people have on, not being able to do things. And one of the things that separates performers from really high performers is the ability to cope with that fear barrier, to step past it, to jump and see success and celebrate. And that's what I'm really excited about. I do have some pictures of some of the stuff that we have. This picture that you can see, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a jump bay. But inside of that, you'll be able to see a person jump and then actually go to the virtual world.
James, can I ask a question? Chris, just jump in, because I'm like gagging to ask some questions.
I know. You want to come visit me in Salt Lake now. I know.
I know. I need to come over on a plane as soon as end of November. I'm sure I'll be there. But how do you do the experience? Is it going to be in a location physical all the time and you get rigged up, or can you do it at home eventually? What's the plan?
It's a location-based experience like the Void. I mean, the technology we're using will be several years before that actually is available in your home, because we add so many physical effects. The fact of actually jumping and flying and being in the experience to a parachute is harder to do at home. And from my perspective, I want to be as authentic as I can to the experience. And so There is wingsuit flying things you could do in a 3DOF and 6DOF system at your house, but they don't really get all the way there. They don't convince you that this is actually happening to you.
Yeah.
Where jump takes it all the way there. Like you completely 100% that believe that you're falling 5,000 feet to death, and you pull out of it and you fly. It's pretty fun. Inside of a virtual simulation, we can manipulate physics, we can manipulate all kinds of things, so you can have success the first time you do this, and you won't die. You don't die.
We have a few minutes left. I want to wrap back around to Andrea. Andrea, leaving this open for you, I know you've got thousands of thoughts about 6DOF and VR. I'm leaving the forum open for you. What other comments do you have as we wrap this up?
Man, there's just too much to say on
I
this.
know.
And in this particular group to discuss, like there are tons of questions I want to ask everyone. But yeah, we just have like 3 minutes left. So as a parting thought, I would just like to say that for me, at the end of the day, VR is obviously not just about architecture or the particular uses that we're discussing here. It can and it will go into all the fields, because what it is at its heart, it's a cognitive manipulation machine. The reason each of us is able to do the things that we do and that we've been describing here is because we're manipulating the sensorial output of the person. And it actually goes even deeper. There are many studies being done more and more every day about how you can control the deeper cognitive pathways of the brain. So what in our lives is about a cognitive process? Well, everything. Who we are, the way we think, intrapersonal relationships. So it just covers everything. And I think it's important to correctly label VR like this, to just label it for what it is. Because otherwise it's going to happen like it happened with other things, like other kind of platforms and technologically mediated social experiences, where we woke up 20 years later, oops, this is what this actually is.
Yeah.
So it's important to label it correctly, to recognize the depth at which this sword is going to cut, and that it will and does cut both ways.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I would like to wrap this up, because we are talking at a WebXR panel, just to let those that don't know that WebXR is fully accessible with 6 degrees of freedom to try out. And even though, WebXR is still, got a lot of room to grow. Currently you can't have super high fidelity experiences, but that's changing even as we speak. And I'm watching the progress of WebXR just changing almost overnight. And it's going to be amazing. The accessibility can't be beat with that WebXR, but I'm encouraging everyone, get in there, try out 6 degrees of freedom on your various platforms in WebXR. It's amazing, and you'll understand what our guests here have been talking about. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you so much for this panel here, because I think, there's a good point to kind of end on, Chris, in sense of, I think this is WebXR Design Summit, so we are talking about WebXR, but I think there's a lot of design things that are happening that are not in WebXR yet, but are happening at the frontiers of what's happening in Unreal Engine and Unity, and kind of the highest end premier immersive experiences, some of the stuff that we're talking about here with this location-based entertainment and each of the projects that each of you are talking about. But we are on this roadmap of looking at, the frontiers of environmental design and fully immersive 6DOF experiences. So that was a great survey of some of the stuff that's happening. So thank you all for sharing all of that.
And I think before you guys leave, James, there's a big question about the helmet that's sitting next to you, the big red one. Is that like a real VR headset?
Yes.
Secret helmet.
There you
Just
go.
talking about, maybe there's a 7th DOF if you want to. It's touch and
Wow.
feel. When you put this thing on, you feel prepared to actually make the jump. It's pretty fun.
Will it make me feel like
everybody putting this on? This is a real headset. Has a VR headset built inside. Has lots of sensors. Has a whole bunch of stuff. So.
Wow. Now you've seen it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to our 6DOF panel. I was just saying, I just made a mention on Twitter. You guys are the reason, the big reason why 6DOF matters, your inspiration. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and contribution to the work and the community and sharing your knowledge today. Thank you.